Hey Manny, how's it going?
It's good. How are you, Dan?
Good. Hey, thanks for participating this this call as as a guest on the show. For those who are watching this right now, this is an ongoing series where I interview, people who I work with as a client for these main or FANG data science interviews, machine learning engineering interviews. Or current professionals in that industry or those companies that that a lot of us sort of dream to work at, and so I figure this series is a great way to kind of get to know each other, but also just kind of talk about general things, career experience, interview process, interview tips, hacks. So I have Manny here, and Manny, I've worked with him as a client for these mock interview service that I provide on datainterview.com/coaching. Definitely check it out if you're looking to really rocket boost your interview prep process. I provide personalized coaching and whatnot. And recently, congrats to Manny. He ended up getting accepting an offer at Meta data scientist L5 position. So congrats to Manny. So we're here to basically talk about his sort of general career experience, along with some general tips about interview process. And obviously, we don't want to violate any of the NDA stuff. I don't want to get in trouble, and he doesn't want to get in trouble. So we're going to keep things, that are somewhat public, that are publicly available out there. And we hope to provide really good and valuable tips and hacks for the viewers out there. So without further ado, I will let Manny take over the floor for a bit. And Manny, just tell us your general sort of career experiences. I think you have a very interesting career background, how you switched from a quant background, which you did for 3 years, and you made it over to more the data science stuff. And now you're on your way to a reputable company, Meta. Very hard to get to place, right now. And so just yeah, it's your floor.
Thank you, Dan. So let me give you a little bit of my background for the listener here. So before applying for Meta, I was the data scientist for a couple of years in a mental health care company. I was the tech lead there. So focusing on a lot of the analytics cycle for the company, building exploration, different data engineering pipelines, so full stack data scientist role. And prior to that, I was a quantitative analyst in the capital market industry, focusing on building forecast, factor analysis, performance attributions for asset management funds, if you're interested in the field. So I made a switch, I would say 2 or 3 years ago, from capital market to tech, just because I'm super interested in the data science field. I feel like with the skill set, quantitative analyst skill set, there's a lot of overlap with data science too. So I made the switch and I do not regret. So applying to Meta now, just because I want to see what is it like joining a world-class data science team. And there is quite some difference compared to my previous background at the mental health care startup and in capital market. So definitely need to ramp up a lot of my skill sets in terms of interviewing and knowledge. So that's when Dan comes in. Um, I was using the data interview material extensively. And at the end, I had a mock interview with Dan, which is super valuable to me. And now I'm here. So thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the intro about yourself, Manny. I think you have a very fascinating background because you used to be in this quant industry, and I always have mad respect for anyone in the quant industry, in general. Just out of curiosity though, like, since you were very deeply plugged into that industry, um, have you thought about maybe like getting into like further expanding that, like maybe kind of getting into more of these reputable quant firms like Citadel, Goldman Sachs? or I don't know, just become a day trader.
Yeah. So since I graduated college, I've been really trained to be a quant in some sense. I did a master program in quantitative finance, and on my side projects, I had some cryptocurrency, day trading, algorithmic trading system going on. So definitely it is my interest to continue to pursue the quant view in some sense. But I would say one reason why I jump from the quant view to technology, especially in particular data science, is because I feel like my skill set can really help more people. Um, just going into tech, that's why I was in a I was in a mental health care company, just trying to use my skill set, scale my skill set to help more people. And now Meta, I can influence really a lot of people
Yeah,
just by changing maybe a small part there. So I've been
yeah.
enjoying that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because you and I kind of have a similar sort of. I mean, I didn't start with the quant, but I was a data science consultant at
Mm,
a firm called Booz and Hamilton
mm,
several years ago, and it was primarily government contracts that I was dealing with, like the U.S. Marines and whatnot. I did
mm,
get a chance to do a really cool project where I was on site at the U.S. Pentagon. I was doing analytics for the Marines, and that was pretty cool. Um, but I always felt like, what, like I want to be in more of a world where it would have an impact worldwide,
yeah.
and places like Google, Meta, obviously have this big scale potential, in
Mm,
terms of any kind of projects that you work on, and these single little data points are like $1 billion data points,
yeah.
and as soon as when I entered Google and as a finance data scientist, I think one of the sexiest things I was really dealing with was the fact that I was looking at like I got my hands on like revenue data for like Google Ads, and just looking at all these data points, and just like really making sense of like how the world works in the lens of Google. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that scale is just immense and very powerful. But at the same time, with what is that line, like, with great responsibility? With what is
With
why
great
am I
responsibility.
forgetting this infamous Spider-Man line? Um,
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
yeah. Anyways, yeah. Anyways, all right. So all right, going back to you. Um, uh, yeah. So I'd love to kind of learn a little bit more about like how, obviously making that transition from this
Mm,
like quant to more of its data science can be tricky, right? Because it's still
yeah.
in some sense a different skill set. So could you talk to the viewers a little bit more about that experience of that transition?
Yeah. I will start by talking about the similarities and the overlap, and then I'll talk about the difference. Does it sound okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the similarity is really the technical skill set, the math mathematics or statistics foundations that you have. So um, in capital market or in quantitative finance, we rely heavily on forecasting or back testing, a lot of time series modeling, which applies to data science, obviously. And you program a lot in Python and SQL, which also is applicable for data scientists. So there's a lot of technical skill set overlap. Now, the difference to me really comes down to a few things, mostly on product. So in quantitative finance, there's no such thing as products. I guess you work day in and day out with stock market data or bond market, whatever market you participate in. However, in the tech world, there's products, there's different features, and they require different domain expertise. So I think that was like when I come in as a data scientist at Ginger, my previous employer. That was the hardest thing. And then you also have different concepts like A/B testings. I've studied about it in second year courses in college, but never applied it.
Yeah.
So these are like the transition that's needed.
Yeah. And I think that's the hardest part because a lot of these tech companies have some underlying expectation that, oh, we're looking for people who have um, experience in A/B testing, counterfactual models and
Mm,
propensity models and et cetera and et cetera. And I think it's also just really impressive that you were able to secure a relatively high position, right? L5 position, that's really hard to get. Most people on average getting L3, L4, but you were placed at L5, coming from this kind of non-traditional sort of data science background to more of this role, and so what I guess what were some of the tricks or the hacks that you use as a way to kind of prepare for interviews in general, I guess.
yeah. So there's quite a few things that I prepare for, and in particular, I think the most important thing is study a lot and practice a lot. So I would say before applying to Meta or when I applied for Meta and other companies, I did have some technical gaps in between, especially in experimentation. So I remember just I was struggling because there's experimentation obviously is a super big topic. So I was struggling about okay, how should I even start? And then that's when I stumbled upon different blogs and DataInterview.com. And there's actually a top-down overview of okay, here's what you need, uh, type of skill sets you need to succeed in different interviews. There's technical parts, SQL and Python. There is statistics, and then A/B testing, product sense. So by looking at it, I'm able to break it down from top down to what do I need in particular components. Study, go through a few mock interviews with friends and with you then join a lot, participate in a lot of actual interviews. I applied for many companies, I think 10 plus, and just keep on trying. It's okay to fail. So I guess
Yeah,
that's my tips. Yeah.
yeah. I think there's a number of ways we can definitely go from here. You definitely brought up a lot of interesting things from how you do the prep to what kind of resources they use and whatnot. I'm very interested about, I guess, your sort of practice regimen. I'm a huge, like, I love going to the gym. I love fitness. I'm actually right now studying for certified personal training exams, so I can become
Ah,
a certified personal trainer.
cool.
Um, you know, because I like working out. I like working out with my friends. I used to date a girl where I did personal training for her and stuff like that. And so
Nice.
I'm like, hey, why don't I just kind of do this on the side? Anyways, I'm in general for me when it comes to like, okay, if I have a target objective that I'm trying to achieve, then
Mm,
I have a very structured schedule. And
mm,
that's what I did when I was preparing for Google interview and other interviews back in 2019.
mm,
I was like, okay, this is target X, Y, Z. Here's my practice routine on a day-to-day basis. Now, obviously, this isn't recommended for everyone, but this is just who I am. It works best for me. Very curious to know what your just kind of day-to-day or week-to-week practice regimen was like.
yeah, let's see. So I think you touch on it a little bit then. It's the consistency that matters. So whenever you try to work out or try to study for something, um, consistency matters. So building a schedule definitely helped me. But personally, because I do not like to be restricted by a particular timetable, say, okay, 7 p.m. tomorrow I have to study or whatnot. So what I did is, I guess it is a productivity hack that I learned from YouTube, likely, is that every day I write down three things that I want to accomplish, and just three things. You can be 3 to 5, but I stick with three. And I remember back when I was practicing, I always write down I have to study for X amount of time that day. So I'll stick to that schedule. Yeah.
Got it.
And yeah,
Okay. Sorry, were you gonna say something
yeah,
else then?
yeah. I was also gonna say one thing with planning is that if you try to achieve too much, for example, if I write down I want to study for 2 hours, it will give yourself a lot of pressure and you may not actually end up studying at all. So the trick that I normally use is to write down a very accomplishable goal. For example, I will write down I have to log into my computer, be specific, log into my computer and study for 15 minutes.
Mm,
Normally, once I study for 15 minutes, I can keep on going for another 2 hours.
mm. I think that's a really good advice. That kind of reminds me of something that I came across from a friend of mine who's in sales, and he said, you know, in sales, like there's a certain quota that we're trying to achieve, but we usually have these targets. We have what we call a standard, which is like what is a minimum expectation we at least want to be able to do, right? In this case,
Yeah,
it can be 15 minutes for you. And then we have like a goal, which is, how do you raise that standard, right? So maybe it's like studying for 1 hour. Um, you know, in a way, like I also have the same thing too, which is, but for me, I think I was always just trying to kind of hit that goal just because that's really what I needed personally for myself. Um, and that kind of shows what, I think the main idea is that for people who are watching this, I think that preparation it's not enough to really know what could be asked in these interviews, right? It's also just about how do you set up the next 30 days, the next 60 days, 90 days to prepare for these opportunities because success doesn't happen just by knowledge. You have to practice to really
mhm,
get to that level, right? And so that's why I think it's really, really important to really understand, how are individuals who ended up succeeding, what were the things that they did leading up to that event. So I think it's really important that we cover this. Okay, that's great. So I'd love to kind of segue over to, like some of the mock interview services that I
mhm,
provided for you. So for those who are not familiar, mock interviews I provided is, okay, you tell me what is a company, what is around, what is a role that you're targeting. And then for 1 hour, I dedicate all my time for you. I ask questions that are most likely going to be asked in these companies. And then I give you the solutions along with an assessment and general tips about how do you proceed forward. And when we work together, as I recall, I we had I was asking these product case questions, and your response style tended to be somewhat lengthy, very
mhm.
comprehensive for sure, lengthy, right? And that's something that I sort of pointed out. So just kind of want to talk about, what were the things that was really helpful for you in through these mock interview sessions? Could
Yeah,
you share your experience about that?
yeah, totally. So I would say going into the mock interview, I already had a couple of on-sites before. I think I've couple, I at least failed one of those on-sites, might have got an offer for another one. But I remember for the one on-site that I failed, um, there was a few things that I realized uh, I sensed that something's missing. One is that since I'm running, uh, I'm getting not enough time to answer my questions. The interviewer was rushing me. I don't know why. And seems like there's a lot of the communication between me and the interviewer was not as good. Anyway, I was suspecting that. And then going into the mock interview, I believe that I was answering the questions okay, maybe not be perfect, But then you pointed out a few things that I actually wrote down, and I make sure I read it prior to any interviews I have later. So I have it write down. I'll let you know what they are. One is be concise. I realized when I interview questions, when I answer questions, I was not concise at all. I was just trying to bring up a backstory, blah blah blah, for 5 minutes before I answer the question. So I think that was, if I have to pick the singular most important thing from the mock interview, that was that. Like just by then you pointing it out for like one sentence, it changed my entire interview game.
That
Um,
sounds
yeah. Second, I remember then you told me to smile more. I was too stressed out even in a mock interview, and then I was watching a recording. Hey, I was not smiling, but for example, right now we're having a chat. I'm actually smiling. I'm relaxed, and it actually does change the interaction between you and the interviewer. So I think that was great too. Uh, Another thing is that um, then you were saying that I was talking too much. I should pause sometimes to allow interviewer to jot notes or even like ask me questions. So I did that after every questions or in between. I make sure I have a pause to allow the interviewer to absorb what I'm saying too. Because if I keep talking for 30 minutes, people are gonna get lost. So
yeah.
that compared to some pointers you have for my answer technically, for example, how should I describe the regression that I use um, was super valuable to me.
Got it. Yeah, a lot of these come from my personal experience as well. My personal experience of failing in interviews and kind of self-reflecting on, what am I doing wrong and what am I doing right, right? And that's why I'm really putting out these content out there, right? Because I really want to help the friction, the mystery box. Oh, why did I fail? Why? And so personally for me, these 3 points that you just hit there, invaluable. Being concise, relaxing, right? Projecting positive energy, cadence of how you talk, right?
Yeah.
Being concise, I learned. So this is something that I sort of learned after I did like a Lyft interview. So it was like a
Mm.
technical phone screen, which I ended up passing. To my surprise, for the technical phone screen. That was like, it was like a long time ago,
Right.
and um, the interviewer asked me about what I did at the Pentagon, what project I worked on, and I could have given her like a 30-second elevator pitch, being like, hey, okay, so basically the U.S. Marines wanted to understand if suicide among the Marine is contagious, right? And so this if we were to do some analysis, this would help like inform policy, make some amends, some programs and whatnot. So establish the problem statement, right? And the second thing is just at a high level, I could have just said. So what we did was, we had this marine data set from 1980 and forward, month-to-month snapshot from like the demotion to the income level, yada yada blah blah. And then, we use a survival analysis model to see what kind of covariates or predictors or have some, correlation with a suicide event. And then we produce some XYZ result, right? So I could have just kind of like condensed and give her the initial sort of 30-second response and then give her a chance to ask some follow-up questions
Right.
and provide some technical solutions. But instead, what I was so fixated on, and it's a very common mistake, I've worked with dozens and dozens of clients by now, and one common mistake I always see is like they get so fixated on, I have to cover all the grounds,
Yeah.
from the beginning. So they're like, okay, all right, this is the lengthy problem statement. I spent 5 minutes explaining it. Now I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes explaining to you
Yeah.
why I choose filtering method over wrapper method for future selection. Here's the reasoning. Here's the situation, and then blah blah blah. Yeah, don't want to do that. Think
Yeah.
about what is that 30-second, 60-second response, and it's not even just about talking about your experience, but also just in general. When it comes to product analytic case studies or business cases, start by thinking about how can you hit the main key points first, and then give the interviewer a chance to ask you follow-up questions that you can address. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I remember it was funny in my prior company, I was an interviewer as well. I remember interviewing for a person, I just asked a very general question, just tell me about your story, why did you apply? And the person tried to give me at least a 5 to 10 minutes response to me. In the middle, I had to stop him a little bit and say, hey, that's okay, we can move on. But he said, no, 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 let me tell you more about my, my high school experience. Like, actually, that was, wow, that was a red flag.
That's funny. Yeah, and another key thing that you just mentioned earlier about was just relaxing, right? I think it's really important. I mean, even during this call right now, I'm not gonna lie to you, I do feel a little bit nervous, because there's people watching. There's gonna be
Right,
people watching us, right?
right.
The bottom line is this, that in any communication situation in general, whether it's an interview, whether it's an informal setting, people are nervous to some degree, okay? It gets nervous for the interviewer side, interviewee side, candidate side, but it's also nervous for interviewer side as well too, because sometimes candidates go in this direction where either they're super smart and the interviewer doesn't really know what would be an intelligent follow-up question to ask in that situation, or it could just be a situation where the interviewer, him or herself, is just nervous, and so nervousness comes both ways, and I think it's just important for us to just clearly establish that um, it is perfectly fine to feel nervous, and that any nervousness that we feel in general, it's not something that we should necessarily just try to tame. It's just something that we should just acknowledge that this is just a human condition. And then the best things that we can do in that situation is just focus on positive energy. What is the main reason as to why we go on these interviews, right? And one is because we want the experience, we want the opportunity of working in these companies. And the second thing I'd like to put out there is that like what you mentioned is like, just because you failed this time around, it's not the end of the world. There's always another chance
Hmm.
again and again. Recruiters will always reach out. If they've done it first time, they'll do it again. So there's always that second chance of doing it. And the
Yeah.
third thing I'd like to just provide out there is that I meditate a lot. I'm a huge proponent of these mindful techniques, and one technique I always did, and just before phone screening or on site, in order to really get in the zone, is I would do meditation. The type of meditation I would do is like a body focused meditation where I focus on like basically my chakra areas, spiritual voodoo stuff, but that kind of focused meditation really helped me focus on, okay, here's a problem that I need to solve. Let's put aside my emotion for now. Let's really think about this logically.
Yeah, totally. +1 on the meditation part. Instead of meditating, I was just doing, normally I just do deep breathing for a minute or two. That would already help me calm down a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd love to talk to you about a little bit more about the interview prep stuff,
Mm.
interview strategy. So, what are your, I guess, general tips on technical interview prep for the meta interview?
By technical, do you mean
Like
like the programming part?
SQL, yeah, SQL, probability,
I see.
process, those sort of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, for for SQL or Python, you can choose either language to use for most companies that apply for. It's just practicing. Um, there are, I would say, finite amount of topics that they can ask you, especially in data manipulation. So especially if you can get your hand on different mock interviews and actually practice, I think um, through many times of iterations, you'll be fine. I would say for SQL or Python, most important part is actually may not be the solution itself in a lot of times. It is before you actually writing code, ask follow-up questions to actually understand what the interviewers are talking about. give them a high-level breakdown of how you're gonna write the code so they can follow, and they can give you pointers too sometimes if they're nice. So that's really important. Don't worry too much about the syntax. Syntax generally doesn't matter. So that's for the technical programming part. Now for the statistics probability piece, if you have like a good foundation background in statistics, mathematics, I would say you can just study a little bit, just try to do mock interviews. But a good foundations is important because there is a wide variety of questions that they can ask. I don't think it is possible to just study everything in a week or two. But if you have a good foundations already, then you can start doing mock interviews. You can study very particular concepts that apply to tech. For example, for Meta, in particular, network effects is a big topic for experimentation, A/B testing. So these are specific topics that you can focus on. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. And just want to kind of briefly talk about that. And I think just, we want to obviously talk about this at a general level, but I think there are a lot of like people out there who are in product data science background, doesn't have prior experience in A/B experiment. They have an
hmm
A/B experiment around. They're like freaking out. Okay, what are the
hmm
things that I need to talk about?
hmm
So yeah, what are just want to bounce around ideas with you. What are some of the key ideas candidates should definitely cover whenever they're asked the type of problem that requires A/B experiment?
Yeah. I may not cover all of them right now, just off the top of my head. Whenever you ask experimentation questions, you really need to think in a way, like a top-down level way. So what I mean is that whenever a company asks me about, hey, I want to run A/B testing for particular features, for example, what kind of metrics should I optimize for? Should I look at? Uh, the first thing that everyone should do is to understand what is the company's mission, what is their value statement. So understanding that from top down, why this particular feature metrics should be, because they should always roll up to the mission. For Meta, it is to connect people around the world. So how can you build experimentation? What should you optimize for in order to have that link to better connect people? And after that, normally you should really think through um, what is the experimentations about, like fine details, keep asking questions, make sure you understand what the experimentation is for, and then think through different metrics, guardrail metrics, and different, I would say, parameters that you can adjust. Yeah, I think like these are high level, the few things that I can think of.
Yeah, and experimentation parameters obviously being the standard set of like significance level or
Mm-hmm.
statistical parameter, minimum detectable effect,
Mm-hmm.
sample size determination, and experimentation runtime.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and also I think something that people also should mention is like randomization unit. Or at what
Right.
level are you randomizing, right? And for obviously for platforms like Meta, you would want to account for the network effect. So you would ideally want to. Of course, it really depends on the feature, right? But if it's a type of feature where it's like maybe you're changing ranking on the newsfeed or something like that, if you make some tweak for one user, it's going to have a ripple effect on other users. You can't really isolate the effect on that one. So you would ideally want to do randomization at like a cohort of user level instead of like just an individual user level. Yeah, and then the last part I think is the statistical analysis part, right? So you gather your result. Do you ramp up? Do you launch? And also even before you decide, obviously doing some internal and external validity checks on that.
Yeah, that's comprehensive.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. The last point that I'd love to really cover is the behavioral part. This is a common question I often get from candidates is like, how do you prepare for behavioral? How do you respond to this, right? I think a really good way is just like give an example.
Right.
So on top of my head, I'm trying to think of a question. Do you know any behavioral question you could?
Yeah, I think a question that I got asked quite a few times is along the line of prioritization. So, for example, people will frame it as imagine you're working on a particular project, you and your team working on a particular project to drive for a particular KPI, and all of a sudden, there's something new that the product manager is hoping you to work on.
Yeah.
What would you do? Like these
Yeah.
are the behavioral questions. Yeah.
Yeah, so I will answer that.
Go
And then
ahead.
I'll
Yes.
give you a behavioral question. All right. Okay. So, all right. So that's okay. So I've actually ran into a situation like this before at Google where so this was about building like this anomaly detection tool. So our team was at a very kind of early stage. We're trying to figure out, okay, what is the value proposition for the data science team within finance? Because it wasn't really there. It wasn't really there before. And at this stage, we have some understanding that we're obviously working with a lot of time series data, working with various finance teams across the Google org, whether we're talking about like YouTube or various teams within ads, and like Android and whatnot. And so we knew that a lot of these teams had like a manual way to really identify like anomalous events on time series data. They would use some business heuristics. Oh, it's like 2 standard deviation from like moving mean, so therefore it's like an event that we should look for, right? And it had and depending on the team, that flagging would have different applications from, maybe they're trying to prevent, like like customers who are not paying Google ads, like the invoices that they owe. So it could be for like a collection team or something like that. And prior to this, so that's like the background. And the what was kind of tricky was like we had initially sort of thought, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to build an anomaly detection system where we use like statistical model as a way to basically automate what would be an automatic kind of flagging of these anomalous events on time series data. But then the manager we worked with, also worked with like different teams, like a BI team, and BI team had this particular instance where they were working with these messy data set, like null values or there's like this master table that's dependent on all these upstream tables, and if it's out of sync, all of a sudden this table's all messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And then she all of a sudden had a different idea about the direction of the project, which was let's not focus on the business metrics, but let's more focus on like data cleaning.
Yeah.
And I remember I was working with a colleague around this time, and he was more focused on the stakeholder management side. I was more focused on technical deliverable. And we were kind of thinking, wait, that's a completely different direction of what we had initially agreed on from our BRD, like business requirement documentation.
Yeah.
So this took a number of conversations. So we were confused. The manager's confused. The stakeholders are somewhat confused. What's the direction of where we're going with this? And it's a lot of sort of back and forth exchange. And at some point, me and my colleague had to have like this meeting with her because this project just wasn't going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we did this sort of meeting where in Google we do this sort of thing called retrospect. retrospective meeting. So it's like, let's think about, well, what, based on the current status of the meeting, what's good about the project, what is bad about the project, good, bad, and ugly. So it's like, okay, so you're listing these things, and what we sort of realized that, okay, we really needed a line here. We really need a line, and our alignment really should be, what is the quickest win, right? Like, what is the easiest win, based on the limited time we have? And a lot of data science projects are in general like that, right? You don't have all the luxury in the world to research whatever you want. It's not like a Kaggle exercise. You have finite time. You have to bring deliverable in this big open situation. And so what we decided was that, okay, let's shift our attention away from the data cleaning part. Maybe that's going to be the phase 2.0. For 1.0, let's focus on these anomaly detection on the business KPIs. So we pivoted to that. We delivered a solution to our first stakeholder within one of the ads team. And from there, it has this, what is called like ripple effect. Once you get one sponsor to vouch for you, it's easy to do that for other teams as well, because now we have testimonial. So this framework that we built was easily replicatable for other various teams. So it was a big win overall, and I was more focused on the technical part of it, which was like the building out the business, building out the statistical methodology in terms of how do we rank these outliers. But yeah, that's an example of the situation that you just described there.
Yeah, I think it's good. I particularly like at the end how you mentioned after you are solving this particular problem, you start to build a framework. So in the future, teams can use that framework as well. I think it's a good touch at the end.
Yeah. All right. So my turn to you is, how do you define success in a project?
I would say whenever, again, I got asked these questions, I will always think about it from a top-down view, because success can mean a lot of things. For a particular project, let's just say I'm trying to build a new feature in Meta. The particular success really should tie back to, are we connecting people together? So whenever I'm thinking of that way, I'll define my success in this way and have a long-term and a short-term success metrics too. It doesn't have to be that's a quantitative metrics, but also have a way to qualitatively describe what success means. The combination of qualitative and quantitative success definition will go a really long way. So that's how I normally think about it.
Okay, got it, great. All right, well, so that's all. I mean, that's all the questions I have. I think this was really comprehensive, and this is really great. Really appreciate your time on this. For those who are watching, definitely check out DataInterview.com. There's courses, there's the coaching, and now there's a new service, a resume review. So if you're interested in any of these services, definitely check it out, and look forward to more valuable content for you out there, for candidates out there. Any last words for people, maybe?
I'll just promote DataInterview.com. It helped me tremendously. So if you have any questions too about interviewing for a listener out there, feel free to reach out to me. I think Dan will likely provide some of my contact information down below as well.
Sounds good. Yeah, I will put in the comment in the description of this video down below. Great. All right. Well, thank you for your time, Manny.
Thank you.